Hello, welcome to Axiom Curve Flux News on the 11th of April 2015. I'm PJ and I'm joined today on the panel with Blackhole Bridger and Dave Witcher. How you doing, Paul? Dave, you both all right?
Yeah, great, thanks.
All good here, my man. All good here.
Good stuff, Dave. It's nice to have you with us. I hope
Thank
you
you.
enjoy what we're doing. We've got some interesting comments. So I'll pass it straight over to you, Blackhole, for you to start us off with.
Okay, good evening, viewers. My articles tonight are all relating to the National Health Service, and we start off with the beginning of the National Health Service. Norman Bevin was the Labour Party Minister for Healthcare and Housing under Prime Minister Clement Attlee. It was a huge plan to set up the National Health Service, and the first National Health Service hospital was opened was Park Hospital in Manchester on July the 5th of 1948. The early years, 1948 to 1959. July the 5th, 1948, the National Health Service Health Secretary Norman Bevin opens Park Hospital in Manchester, the image on the right. It is the climax of a hugely ambitious plan to bring good health care to all. For the first time, hospitals, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, opticians and dentists are brought together under one umbrella organisation to provide services that are free for all at the point of delivery. The central principles are clear. Health service will be available to all and financed entirely from taxation, which means that people pay into it according to their means. And that's the article, and we'll go on to the principles of the NHS. And the principles and funding the National Health Service was created out of the ideal that good health care should be available to all, regardless of wealth. When it was launched by the then Ministry of Health and Norman Bevin on the 5th of July 1948, it was based on three core principles: that it met the needs of everyone, that it be free at the point of delivery, that it based on clinical need, not ability to pay. These three principles have guided the development of the National Health Service for more years. In 11 of Health published the National Health Service Constitution. It sets out the guiding principles of the National Health Service and your rights as a National Health Service patient. The 7 key principle guides the NHS is all it does. They have underpinned by core NHS values, which have derived from extensive discussions with staff, patients and the public. The National Health Service principles are listed below, but you can find an in-depth explanation about each principle in the handbook to the National Health Service Constitution PDF 79B. The first principle being the NHS provides a comprehensive service available to all. This principle applies irrespectively of gender, race, disability, age, sexual orientation, religion, belief, gender reassignment, pregnancy and maternity, or marital or civil partnership status. The service is designed to diagnose, treat and improve both physical and mental health as a duty to each and every individual that it serves, and must respect their human rights. At the same time, it has a wider social duty, promote equality through the services it provides, and to pay particular attention to groups or sections of society where improvements in health and life expectancy are not keeping pace with the rest of the population. Principle number 2 is access to the National Health Services based on needs individuals. The National Health Services are free of charge, except in limited circumstances sanctioned by Parliament. Get help with national health charges, information of overseas visitors wanting to access the National Health Service. Principle number 3 being, the NHS aspires to the highest standards of excellence and professionalism in the provision of high quality care that is safe, effective and focused on patient experience, in the people it employs and in the support, education, training and development they receive. In the leadership and management through its innovation, the promotion, conduct and use of research to improve the current and future health and care of the population. Respect, dignity, compassion and care should be at the core of how patients and staff are treated, not only because that it is the right thing to do, but because patient safety, experience and outcomes are all improved when staff are valued, empowered and supported. Principle, the is to put patients at the heart of everything it does. It should support individuals to promote and manage their own health. National Health Services must reflect and should be coordinated around the tailored to the needs and preferences of patients, their families and their carers, patients with their families and carers where appropriate, will be involved in and consulted on all decisions about their care and treatment. The National Health Service will actively encourage feedback from the public, patients and staff, welcome it and use it to improve its services. Find out about the national the pay outcome measures. And principle number 5, the NHS works across organisational boundaries and in partnership with other organisations in the interest of patients, local communities and the wider population. The NHS is an integrated system of organisations and services bound together by the principles of values reflected in the Constitution. The NHS is committed to working jointly with other local authority services, other public sector organisations and a wide range of private and voluntary sector organisations to provide and deliver improvements in health and well-being. Principle number 6, service is committed to value for money and the most effective, fair and sustainable use of finite resources. Public funds for healthcare will be devoted solely to the benefit of the people that the NHS serves. Principle number 7, the NHS is a public, communities and patients that it serves. The NHS is a national service funded through national taxation. The government sets the framework for the NHS and it is accountable to Parliament for its operation. However, most decisions in the NHS, especially those about the treatment of individuals and the detailed organisation of services, are rightly taken by the local NHS and by patients with their clinicians and systems of responsibility and accountability for taking decisions in the NHS should be transparent and clear to the public, patients and staff. The government will ensure that there is always a clear and up-to-date statement on the National Health Service Service accountability for this person that inspire passion, the NHS, and the values underpin everything it is put does. The public and staff develop explore values, tailoring them to their local needs. The National Health Service values provide common ground for cooperation to achieve shared aspirations at all levels of the National Health Service. Working together for patients, the value of working together for patients is a central tenet guiding services provision in the National Health Service and other organisations providing health services. Patients must come first in everything the National Health Service does. All parts of the National Health Service system should act and collaborate in the interest of patients. Always putting patients' interests before institutions, even when that involves admitting mistakes, as well as working with each other. Health service organisation and providers should also involve staff, patients, carers and local communities to ensure they are providing services tailored to local needs. Well, respect and dignity. Every into contact with service and organisations providing health services should always be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of whether they are a patient, carer or member of staff. This value seeks to ensure that organisations value and respect different needs, aspirations and priorities, and take them into account when designing and delivering services. The National Health Service aims to foster a spirit of candour and a culture of humility, openness and honesty. Communicate clearly and openly with patients, relatives and carers. Commitment to quality of care. The NHS aspires to the highest standards of excellence and professionalism in the provision of high quality care that is safe, effective and focused on patient experience. Quality should not be compromised. The relentless pursuit of safe, compassionate care for every person who uses and relies on the services is a collective endeavour, requiring collective effort and collaboration. The delivery of high quality care is dependent on feedback. Organisations that welcome feedback from parents and staff are able to identify and drive areas for improvement. Compassionate care ties closely with respect and dignity in that individual patients, carers and relatives must be treated with sensitivity and kindness. The business of the National Health Service extends beyond providing clinical care and includes alleviating pain, distress and making people feel valued and that their concerns are improved. The core function of the National Health Service is emphasised in this value. The National Health Service seeks to improve the health and well-being of patients, communities and its staff through professionalism, innovation and excellence in care. This value also recognises that to really improve lives, the National Health Service needs to be helping people and their communities take responsibility for living healthier lives. Everyone counts. We have a responsible with national resources, ensuring they are distributed fairly to those most in need. Nobody should be discriminated or disadvantaged, and everyone should be treated with equal respect and importance. Do you think those principles are still kept up with today? Let's see what the BBC he has to say about this.
Partially, Paul. I like the principle number 4. Were it that? If you want to just go back to principle number 4.
Principle number 4, which I can't remember which one you was on about, but we'll have a quick look. Principle number 4. The NHS aspires to put patients at the heart of everything it does.
Maybe maybe it was principle 3. Hold on, could be 3.
Oh, well, I think they went on holiday for that one anyway. Number 3, yeah. The NHS aspires to the highest standards of excellence and professionalism.
I read that one. It was anyway with the one where it actually took into account the Constitution, and it said doing it under the principles and values.
Yeah.
Maybe it was principle 5. I'm surprised that
yes, it was principle number 5. The NHS is an integrated system of organisations and services bound together by the principles and values reflected in the Constitution. But don't the politicians keep saying we haven't got a Constitution?
Well, that's on their own website as well, isn't it? So I'll remember that one.
Yeah.
Principle number 5, if you want to remember
it. Right. This is an article by the BBC of January the 4th, 2010. David Cameron says NHS at the heart of Tory Manifesto. Conservative leader David Cameron has said the NHS will be his #1 priority as the main parties step up their pre-election campaigning. Have a listen to what he's got to say now. Here we go.
If we must. I'm sure
I'm afraid I'm going to have to subject you to it. Ah, sorry, I thought I'd already preset this. Well.
He didn't do any more debates. He stopped. He said he were only doing one, so he must have missed his.
He stopped on this one by the looks of it.
That's what I'm saying.
Tell you what I did.
Refused, Paul. Here we go. Just give you an exception.
Yeah. Absolutely here behind me. We're going to cut the deficit. That does mean we're going to have to cut public spending. We're very frank about that. We don't, dance around it. We're going to have to cut public spending, but we've made a big choice, which is we are not going to cut the NHS. The NHS is special. It will have real terms growth each year. Every other spending pledge we have made, every other tax pledge we have made is fully costed and fully set out. If you take, for example, the pledge on inheritance tax, which we've said is not for a first budget, but is a pledge for a parliament, that is to be paid for by taxing the non-doms, the people who live here but don't pay full tax here. Every other pledge we have made is costed. And when you look across to what Labour have announced this morning, I mean, it is difficult to take the Conservative spending plans seriously when they haven't set out their own spending plans for the future. It is even more difficult to take them seriously when you consider that when this Chancellor of the Exchequer became Chancellor, he has underestimated our national debt by a staggering £543 billion. So to take any forecast from him is doubly difficult. It is trebly difficult, in fact it is completely impossible, when in virtually 11 seconds, £1 billion of mistakes in his document. To claim that we are committed to abolishing the 50p tax rate immediately, that is not true. To claim we are committed to abolishing the changes on pensions at the top end, that is not true. To claim that we are committed to abolishing stamp duty on share transactions, that is not true. That took me about 11 seconds, and that is £11 billion. This document is complete junk from start to finish.
Well, can I just say, Paul, what is doubly difficult, you might want to pause that before it plays again. We don't need to, it's all right. What is doubly difficult, Paul, is the fact that, the deficit, debt's doubled. So if George did underestimate the amount of deficit and debt, then was that the reason why he doubled it?
That's one way of looking at it, isn't it?
Well, that's the only double difficulty I can see, is that the debt's doubled.
Yeah. Well, it surely has doubled, and it seems to me as if Cameron's promise on the NHS is just melted away in the midday sun, just as the EU referendum before he's come into power melted away in the midday sun also.
Yeah, but see, there's only one snag with that, is it's not hot enough to melt Cameron's face, is it?
Oh, yeah, shall we get off this picture?
Yeah. Let's clear it up. You're going to bring George Osborne up now, aren't you?
Yeah. Right. First Manifesto, he pledged maternity reforms in England to meet mothers' needs. Labour, meanwhile, released a document which they said showed a 34 billion gap in Tory spending plans, a claim which Mr Cameron later described as junk. Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg said Labour Party and Tories were increasingly alike. The general election must be held by early June, but is expected of May. The main parties seeking to set the agenda after the Christmas break. Victorian equalities. BBC political editor Nick Robertson said a long campaign had begun, with some important choices over government spending priorities struggling to get through the rhetoric. Speaking at the run of the Tories' draft election manifesto, Mr Cameron said childbirth was one of the life's most daunting experience, and that it was best to conduct this in a non-emergency setting where possible. Labour's policy had given us bigger and bigger baby factories, he added. Mr Cameron also promised to introduce a health premium, targeting spending at more deprived areas. Health inequalities in the 21st century Britain are as wide as they were in Victorian times. We must target resources at the worst of areas, he said. Mr Cameron's NHS, while tackling the government's budget deficit. In a subsequent interview with the BBC, the Tory leader said he would not make any false promises, sorry, excuse me, on spending or tax cuts. On tax breaks for married couples, considered a policy priority by many in the party. He said wanted to recognise marriage in the tax system and definitely hoped that this would join the Parliament. But he stressed he could not make a commitment to do this over that period because of the vast size of the deficit. Today I am not able to make that promise, he said. He also defended the decision to feature himself in the Tories' new advertising campaign, saying people wanted to know what he would do if he got into power. I want this to be a positive campaign about the change we would bring, he said. We are putting across a positive message. In contrast to Labour's negative approach, was focused on attacking the opposition, he claimed. Chancellor Alistair Darling hosting what he also looked much like the type of media conference seen during official election campaigns, launched an attack on the Conservative spending plans. Nod and wink. He said the Tories have made £1 billion of promises, but can barely explain how they can pay for a quarter of this. This leaves them with a credibility gap of £34 billion. There are not long forgotten promises from another time. All have been confirmed in the last 2 years. Most have been repeated in the last few months. You can't fight an election on a nod and a wink, sometimes claiming you are committed to these promises, and when challenged, claiming you are not. The Health Secretary said not betray the NHS as it planned to scrap targets for waiting times for cancer diagnosis and treatment. Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg said, as far as Labour and the Conservatives are concerned, they will constantly tell people that there are great differences, but it seems to me that they are increasingly alike. You have the Chancellor, Alistair Darling, who delivered a pre-budget report where the sums didn't add up, and now accusing the Conservatives because their sums don't add up. Earlier, School Secretary Ed Balls, he did not know the date of the election, adding that he had no inside knowledge of Prime Minister Gordon Brown's thinking about its timing. But with some predicting an early March poll, he said he thought it would probably come later. He said Labour would increase the amount of one-to-one tuition for failing primary school pupils in England, and that spending on schools would rise every year, this year, next year, and the year after.
Oh,
Well, the Tories got in, didn't they?
that's what I was just about to say, Paul. I mean, when David Cameron were doing his campaigning, he was coming out with some pretty bold statements, and when he actually got in through coalition, unelected, he thought that everything he did say in his campaign, he should have not bothered saying it. So, and then later on, we ended up having him taking things down off the websites and basically adding it all up.
Yeah.
So now
That's why they look.
Yeah, this time round, Blackhole, he's more wiser now. So rather than saying all these things, he's basically said he's not even going to be serving another term after anyway. So the arrogance for him is pretty high.
Yeah, but that's why they love a coalition, because then they can blame it on the other parties that they've got to do as bargaining with each other, and they can't carry out everything they wanted to do, which they had no idea of doing in the first place, to be quite frank.
This is a man who has to promise not to give any false promises.
Yeah, yeah.
And
right, so
as for NHS, just before you carry on, as for NHS, the reason why he's decided not to cut it back during his campaign, was the fact that he wasn't interested in cutting it. He was more interested in stealing it.
Yeah, of course you don't want to cut it, because you're going to get a better big payoff, is he not? Through selling it off, it'd be pretty good stead.
Yeah, well, let's get a few thoughts from Dave before you carry on, Blackhole.
Yeah.
Are you still with us, Dave? Have we got you there?
I'm still here, boys. I'm listening with great intent.
Good stuff. What's your thoughts on NHS then, Dave, so far?
NHS for me, I'm luckily fortunate enough to have my nan, my grandmother, is 93 years of age.
Wow.
When my nan was a child, she was one of 10 siblings, and you've got to bear in mind back then they was in London. A lot of my family sort of grew up in the not rough ends, but where people didn't have much money, but they seemed to be happy. My nan contracted some sort of I don't know if it was like tuberculosis or something that was on her chest. Families back then used to pay money to what they called a panel, where you would pay a few coppers a week and you would be able to get a doctor. The doctor come and see my nan. She was only a kid, about 6 or 7, if that. And the doctor said, well, the only chance we've got is to put a poultice on her. So they put a poultice on her chest, which burnt the fever out, and she's still with us today, albeit a bit frail. But the point I'm getting at is that once the NHS came along, all through my childhood, my grandparents told me how wonderful this NHS system was, because it was brought about by the people, for the people, and run by the people, and that anybody could go and get basic treatment. That, sadly, today isn't the case with the NHS anymore, and quite rightly what you just said, the NHS, as far as I'm concerned, will be completely privatised. They farming out bit by bit, trust here, bit of trust there. Before we know it, everyone will take their eyes off the ball, and the NHS will be completely private. They'll be selling insurance. You'll have to have insurance for your health. And the problem is with that, it's always the people at the bottom, the workers, the people or whatever, that won't be able to access it. And I do a lot of work for a living. Done some work for a nurse in Maidstone Hospital, lovely woman. She said, we as a team care about our patients, but whatever ward we're on or whatever unit we're in, me and my fellow people working there will huddle together, because we know the bureaucrats, if we do something wrong, they will come down on us like a ton of bricks. And they say, we do it because we care about people and we want to fix people. There's too many white collar workers in the NHS. There's too many people raping the finances out of the NHS.
Top heavy. Yeah.
Pardon?
Top heavy.
It is top heavy, and it's going to take some realisation from the people to bring about a change. I mean, if it continues at the rate it's going, we've got a hospital in Pembury, which is a private hospital. It costs the NHS costs the government £20 million a month just to pay the rent on this building. It's wrong. And what disturbed me, I was there some time ago. My partner, unfortunately, was involved in a car crash. We ended up at Pembury, and on paying the parking to get out, there was a sign up said, disabled people are not exempt from levy. They have to pay their parking. And I'm like, what kind of a society are we living in? It's monstrous, because most people that go to hospital are there for a reason. They're ill. Why should you have to pay to park in a building that is publicly funded and publicly run? You're all paying it through general taxation. To me, government just double dips on everything it does.
On triple dips. Yeah, you're right, Dave, because the welfare originally was set up to help those, especially the disabled and those during, come from war.
That's right.
And like today, when you've got things like disabled have got to pay, they have to pay for parking. And that's wrong.
It's a heinous thing. We've got a called the what's it called? It's out in the country, and it'll come to me in a minute. The Benenden Hospital. Back when TB was running rife through the country, they had these satellite hospitals that were in the country where they would go and let people convalesce, get the country air, and it would clear itself up, God willing. And Benenden Hospital now sell an insurance policy of £8 a month, which is basically going back to like being part of a panel. You pay £8 a month and you're entitled to a certain amount of treatment, blah, de, blah, de, blah. Now, I don't get why we should have to do that. And why should we have to have private healthcare when hospitals run from general taxation? That is why the people pay tax.
Yeah, and why is it we're having to pay? Did you say 20 million a week?
£20 million a month was
a month.
Pembury Hospital first.
Imagine that was through the PFI initiative.
I've got no idea how Pembury is paid for, how it's structured.
Yeah.
I'm not.
We're still paying the cost for these private finance initiatives for building the buildings and the infrastructure of that building. Yeah, under a PFI agreement. And yes, although the prices have gone up and everything, we're having to pay triple than that, and it was a complete misnomer of a system right from the word go.
Yeah.
The system's under a lot of pressure, guys. So it really is, and how long it can continue before things need to change. I mean, I for one am not a voter. I've made my feelings perfectly clear on what I consider voting to be and what we lose when we vote. But I'm interested in just viewing from an outside point of view on how this new government is formed and what's going to happen in the new election, because I don't think people are going to properly turn out and vote these people in. I just can't see, with what's going on in the country, that people are going to. There's marches going on everywhere. In London today, there was thousands and thousands of people marching. The word is getting around the country like wildfire, and if I was a politician, I would be seriously contemplating where all this is going to go and where it's going to end up.
Well, this guy in this next article is rubbing his brow. It's not over today because this article comes back from 13th of April of 2011 in The Guardian, and it's Andrew Lansley, who's the Health Secretary. Lansley's criticism from the conference delegates passed motion of no confidence as Health Secretary struggles to persuade public of merits of the National Health Service reforms. Andrew Lansley. Sorry, go ahead.
Falling apart at the seems. It's like a big dam. They're trying to plug all these holes in it, but something's gonna happen. There's gonna be something pivotal that happens. I think.
Do you think we're gonna get a rainbow coalition, as the UK column?
Well, yeah, because they love coalitions, and the more parties that are in them, the more chances of them doing absolutely the heck what they like. And that's what they're after, so they can do the heck what they like and blame it on so many others in the coalition not towing the line, doing this, that, or the other. And that is what they're planning for.
For me, when I look at government and when I look at the Commons, when I look at anything to do with that arena in the public service, I come to one conclusion: that it's all bought and paid for. The Commons used to check upon justice. The Commons, they've all been bought and paid for. Everybody is financed from central government. Therefore, central government controls everything.
Yeah. And we've got to get away from this centralisation, and we've got to have direct democracy. That's the only way to sort this lot out. Direct democracy.
I mean, democracy is really it's a Greek word, and it's a Greek system. How we ever ended up with a democracy in England is beyond me. But nonetheless, that's where we are as a people. And I mean, I just see big things happening this year. I see the people are looking at different avenues. They're researching, they're stumbling across information. Social media is a fantastic medium for people just to even just look at something from a different angle. If people can get away from the television, the tele-vision, and instead of being
Tell big lie television.
And the screens get bigger and bigger, don't they? So
they do get bigger. It's partly it's a difficult one for me also, because our nature generally is one of, the English just want an easy life. We just want to get on, enjoy our families, love our kids, grow old and pass away. That's typically what we are. So we've taken our eye off the ball. We've stopped policing these people. We've stopped holding them to account. We've stopped going to the courtrooms and policing the courtrooms and making sure justice is done. I mean, public galleries now are tiny. And they've just become really like night boss club owners and just thought, well, no one's checking. Let's just carry on and do what we want to do. But I know that when the people start saying, no, enough's enough, time for change, we're not happy with what you're doing, they have no choice but to sit up and listen and be mindful. There's a new Act of Parliament being coming into play on the 13th of this month. It's the Criminal Courts and Justice Act 2015. Theresa May said some time ago that the police needed reforming from the bottom up, and if they didn't do it, she would do it for them. And this Act of Parliament, if you just highlight section 26, says that any constable that breaches outside his office can and may have a imprisonment imposed on him up to 14 years.
wow.
It's really, really good. I guess everyone prints it off and keeps it on them all the time, because I know someone that's used it thus far, and all of a sudden he was said, oh, this cop said on my radio's going, I've got to go and take another call. It will put the fear of God up them, because they could lose their job, they could get defaulted upon with county court judgments, and possibly face imprisonment if they step outside their oath of office. So that is Theresa May and the government listening to the people and doing something about it. We get the people get the government they deserve, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it don't matter who gets in, it's still the government at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's easy. It is so easy for us to blame them. We are what they're doing. Look what they're doing, but we never look in the mirror. We have to look in the mirror and appreciate that we've got the government we deserve.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, if we don't keep our eye on the checks and balances that they're working correctly, then it's their fault for not doing that they're running riot.
Tony Blair kicked the peers out of the House of Commons back in the 90s, late 90s. What did the people do about it? Nothing. And the other thing people don't know is when Parliament is in session and you've got the chief speaker there, the House, the man of the House, directly behind him is the remembrancer for the Corporation of London.
Yeah,
he's listening in, and he's the one behind the scenes is the one you can't see, is the one that's pulling all the strings.
Exactly.
Cameron's a puppet. Osborne's just a puppet. They're all puppets. They do what they're told. It's the Crown Corporation that's pulling the strings. And I don't have a beef with the Crown. Christ, you know, I go out and have meals, and I want to go shopping, buy food, or buy this and buy that. I think that the wheels in motion and that are all good. You know, we live in a good country, and we have, by today's standards, better things, better health, better standards of living than we did back in the 20s and back in the 30s or previous to that. But my issue is the stripping of liberty, and that's where I come from. I'm not keen on politics. I won't vote. Never have done. I've always known myself. But I just come from a place of that I think the people need respecting, and that's why I do what I do, really.
Yeah, because these politicians have got to realise they are our servants. We're not their servants.
We actually are. We
Yeah.
we need to put the flip on it, and if you dare as much suggest that anyone in government now is a public servant, I would expect bad things to happen to you. Them days are gone. There are ways and means in which we can be free, and it will only come about, a change in this country will only come if the people will it so.
Yeah, they're willing to get off their backsides, as you say, and stop watching that television.
I went to Maidstone Borough Council, had an open evening because Maidstone a county town of Kent. The mayor was on show, a gentleman called Richard Thick, Robin Thick, I'm not too sure, Richard Thick, I think, not Robin Thick because he's a singer. And I asked a question which was put over to them prior in an email, and the mayor tried to stop me because it was being live streamed around the world and it was going on their minutes. So it was going on their paperwork, it was on the public record. I didn't let the mayor stop me and I got my question out. But what was really interesting was that the local candidates, the local councillors, all jumped up to my defence. And I looked at them and went, oh my God. They stood up and said to the mayor, no, point of order, you can't do this, you're out of order, let this man have his 3 minutes. And I looked at each and every one of them and I honoured them and I thought, how blessed. They're not all bad guys, trust me. But if you want to change things locally, they have these meetings. They have, from the council and the councillors, there's probably 150 people in them rooms on them nights. They have it every 3 months. How many people in the public turn up? A handful. How many ask questions? Not many. How many record what's going on in these thingies? So what I'm trying to say is if your local councillors and your local mayors and your local councils don't know about your grievances, how can you expect change? Have to engage, and I think councillors are eager for you to put your points across and engage with them, because I know for sure they stood up and protected me. I was quite proud. I was like, fair play, thank you, really was. So I don't know, guys. For me, politics isn't my area. In fairness, I like constitutional law, old law, and a bit of history, and just what's fair, right, and proper. Really, I come from humble means. I'm just a humble man, and I can't stand seeing people of little to no means, ex-squaddies, ex-servicemen and women living on the streets, being treated like lumps of meat, not being respected. I don't, you know, someone puts their life on the line. Oh, my son-in-law's in the army. If anyone puts their life on the line for their country, they're heroes.
Yeah, totally agree.
And when they come home, they will go to a council if they've got nothing or no family to support them. They go to a council, they'll ask once, they won't ask no more. They're proud people. They're trained to survive in harsh conditions. So what do? They go and get sleeping bags and sleep rough on the streets because they're too proud to keep going and asking.
Yeah.
And what are we if, when they come home, we can't look after them? It's disgusting. You know, there's so much.
What's your thoughts on these charities? Just to make it quick, because there's a lot of charities now, and in my opinion, it's getting out of hand. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Charities for me, charity begins at home. And if we can't look after our own children, our own people, and we haven't got an abundance of wealth and happiness, then I'm sorry, we don't get to bail no one out. We got children being abused in this country through the care system. We've got elderly people can't afford to put the boilers on. We've got the disabled people being slashed of benefits. And Cameron says austerity is a good thing. But he's not clamping down on the bankers' bonuses, and he's certainly not clamping down on the foreign aid that they send abroad. They've just sent a chunk of money to India. Now, India has its own space program. If they can put rockets in space, they can pay for their people. But
exactly.
What these politicians spout from their mouths on the TV and the radio, the people believe it. And I have to question, if someone tells me something and I'm interested in it, I try and qualify it. I try and do research and find out if there's any substance in it. But if David Cameron went on the 10 o'clock news tonight, I know we're past 10 o'clock, and he, with a stern face and his pointed fingers and his articulation, said, right guys, tomorrow morning, if you put sugar in your tea because there's a sugar shortage, you're going to get arrested and go to prison. I would bet 99% of the population that watch that dare not put sugar in their tea. Because they've listened to that puppet just come out. Now, as far as I'm concerned, David Cameron's probably a lovely fella. If I had him as a neighbour, he'd probably, if his dog sat on my lawn, he'd probably come around and pick it up and we'd get on lovely. But people need to appreciate he is manipulated. There's people behind the scenes running the show, and he's just doing what he's told to do. And that is, everyone in politics has the same agenda. Jack Straw said a few years ago in a taxi driver, he recorded him, Jack Straw didn't know. He said, Jack Straw said, the English aren't worth saving. And I thought to myself, that's fine, Jack, but you don't get to speak for me. You don't talk for me. The English are worth saving.
Too true.
Because
anyway,
we are a Christian country. We have other faiths that reside here and worship here. We're a Protestant Reformed religion. Now, our laws are based on that, bit of canon law thrown in there as well. But we, in the Western world, are a place of sanctuary where other men and women that are being persecuted in countries around the world can come to and seek safety. If we become anything less than we've always stood for, where do the people of the world that can't go anywhere and are suffering and being murdered and raped and pillaged, where do they go? We've always had compassion, we've always had respect for our brothers and sisters. If we lose it, this world's going to kick off big time.
Yeah, but I think we've long gone past the stage where we were brought up to look after the underdog. Those days seem to be long gone.
Everyone in this country is kept in a perpetual fear-based situation. There's always a boogeyman of some sort out there, whether it be the IRA, Bin Laden, Saddam Hussein. But for me, if you want to find proper perpetrators of heinous crimes, you have to look at home. You have to flip these public cameras 180 degrees, and then you will find who's causing all this divide, who's causing all these problems. The people live in fear in this country, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, and even if you've managed to find your way out of confusion and you're almost stepping out of fear, even at that point, it's still not easy.
I say David Cameron's Daddy Cameron. He's your daddy.
Yeah.
If you step out of line, he's going to come around and beat you with a stick. And
oh yeah, well, he's already done it with calling us all extremists just because we question.
I don't have a problem with any of them. To me, they're just men and women. But
yeah,
they're breaking this country. They're breaking the will of the people.
Yeah,
they're turning us into robots. They're turning us into slaves, and they're putting us into a situation where we're getting too scared to do anything. I mean, my aunt, I was down in London a few months ago, and she was concerned that a church opposite the road from her was going to be turned into a mosque. And I said a few things, just I wasn't being outraged. And she said, well, you can't say that. I said, say what? She said, well, you can't say that. Says who? I've got a mouth. As long as I'm not pointing the finger at someone and calling them bad names, why should I be scared to say what's on my mind?
Mm-hmm.
People are too scared. Yeah.
That was the whole idea of them bringing in this political correctness rubbish, wasn't it? That was so we'd all self-censor ourselves.
Yeah, but if you look at, you know, I like quite studying law a little bit, and you only got the human rights: freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to travel, freedom to feel secure in your person and in your property. But yet, all these bad things are happening, and for me, government, they've got statutory limitations. If they're printing statutes and it's in black and white, then they abide to it.
A couple of minutes on EU, Dave. What's your thoughts on EU? I know you just mentioned human rights, and they all come through EU.
EU, no foreign prince or principality shall ever rule on this soil. I think that my view is that the Queen has no, she believes she has no power. Trust me, she has the power because the people would turn out for the Queen. Trust me. Now, I've been to the Royal Courts of Justice many, many times, and I've spoke with the masters in lengthy conversations, and the arrogance that runs through Parliament is quite staggering. They are on the understanding that they're sovereign, and they're on the understanding that they rule supreme. Now, you can make your own mind up of that, but Parliament absolutely think it is sovereign and it rules supreme.
Yeah, we discussed that when we had Albert Weirs, if you remember, Dave.
Burgess, yeah, bless him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good lad, Albert.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, if you want to talk constitution, I mean, Albert's. I've met Albert on several occasions, and I love the man. There isn't many people in this country that would probably know more about constitutional law than him. He's really up on it.
And there's very few of us left.
You say that, I don't know. I mean, there's. I think they just need pulling out their shells. You know, people, like I said just a second ago, they're too scared to exercise their rights. They're too scared to say what's on their mind.
Most is common sense, though, even if you didn't know any of it.
Well, it is. Yeah, it's just common sense. Yeah. It's what feels right. You are the law. If you're the law, it's whether you exercise it. You can flex their muscles at any time, and you'll see staggering results. A friend of mine who's ex-army, he's a veteran. I spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he phoned me up. When was it? Probably Wednesday night. And he said to me, "I've got to thank you." I said, "What for?" He said, "Well," he said, I had this thing come through from the Network 3. I'd gone slightly over on my internet allowance." He said, "They wanted £200." He said, "I spoke to their manager and said if anyone does anything bad and don't drop this, that he'd go straight to Queen's Bench, file a claim against any man or woman that's doing bad things against him." So they took that under advisement, phoned him back the next day after making their inquiries and said, "We've taken the charge off. We're sorry for any inconvenience," and that'll be the end of the matter. It's just because he's guys, it really is.
Yeah.
It's known who you are. And what gets me is when you start exercising your rights, you'll get people say, "You're not above the law." And I say, "No, I'm not. But neither are they." Because the rule is simple. It applies to everyone.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
police, civil servants, the people. That's why the woman on top of the Old Bailey's got a set of scales in her hand and they're balanced. You know? And like, I was making me laugh. Someone said to me the other day, "Oh, I've got this case going on." But I said, "Who is it between?" He said, "It's between Regina And myself, I said, so that's the Queen, yeah? He said, yeah, it's Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunals. I said, right, write to the Queen, write to her and say, I understand we've got a problem. What can we do to remedy it? And she'll write back and say, I don't know what you're talking about. So take that into the court and say, me and the Queen ain't got no ill business. What's going on here?
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, definitely.
If the Queen's bringing a case against you, write to the woman and say, excuse me, madam, what's the problem?
I don't think you'll get a reply. But,
no, they have to reply.
I'm sure I've heard many cases where people have sent letters forth and.
Well, I've sent claims of write-off to them 2 years ago, registered post, had no reply. So, but what is not rebutted in law stands as fact, and no problem. I don't have a problem with it. And people have slated me for having a claim of right, but I've used it in several times, and one recently. And it seems to me that when I send it out, outlining what it is, who they should go and see if they've got any problems with it, they all go away. They just disappear. It's fantastic. Because ecclesiastical law is Roman law, it's canon law, and the Pope is the head of all the ecclesiastical stuff. And all the court system, all the administrative de facto courts, they're all ecclesiastical. So all these acts and statutes are ecclesiastical. That's why they're all ministers in Parliament. So if you trump them with the top ecclesiastical public notary seal, they all go quiet because they can't argue with a notary.
Mm-hmm.
He signed and sealed it, and he's risen the seal. The seal's risen from the page. And I was watching a programme on Parliament the other night, and when they put these acts of Parliament in, they have to speak it in French, whether it gets accepted or not. But what I found interesting was when these bills go up to get royal assent, they come back with this big red seal on it, and that seal is exactly like the documents that I have. I spoke to Kent Police 3 weeks ago on some alleged speeding incident. I said to the woman over the phone politely, Madam, if you wish to bring a claim against me, that's fine, but I suggest you go and check out the affidavits that were sent in 2 years ago on this particular date. There's a reference number. Take it up with the Chief Constable. If you wish to pursue it, come back to me, but there's costs involved. And they've all gone quiet. Nice. Quite funny, really. But I'm not above the law, guys. I'm subject.
That's it. Nobody.
Just using it like it should be used.
Pardon?
And you're just using it like it should be used.
That's right. It's like a private trust, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, for the time factor, yeah, I'm going to miss a couple of articles, and I've got a few YouTube clips to show. Sorry to butt in, but we are running on time here.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah, so we go on to this one, and it's a party saying a BBC journalist.
John Smith, BBC News. Mr. Miliband, you've attacked the Tories for going negative in this campaign already over this publication of the dossier about your spending commitments, but haven't you gone negative over the NHS? Because you say it will be unrecognisable in 5 years' time, and yet Mr. Cameron has pledged to ring-fence the NHS budget. An extra £2 billion has been promised, and there has winter you scaremongering over the NHS.
Well, look. Now, come on. We will hear people with respect. Particularly Norman. Norman, here's my answer to you. The difference is between facts and falsehoods. If you look at the 27-page dossier that we issued over the weekend, it was all rooted in fact. In fact, the Tories didn't really challenge the facts. They didn't challenge the facts about waiting times in A&E. They didn't challenge the facts about waiting times in relation to your GP. They didn't challenge the facts about waiting times for an operation. And you know what I've got to say is I'm influenced here, and I'm sure Andrew Burnham, who's here with us today, is influenced by this too, by the conversations I have with people in the NHS. But I think you should talk to people in the NHS, Norman, because they will genuinely say to you, with an edge in their voice, where are things going to be in 5 years' time? what kind of NHS are we going to have? I met a young doctor a few months ago who just qualified, and he said to me, you know you've got to have a plan, you know you've got to sort this out, because I want the NHS to be actually there when I'm a doctor. And I think there is real fear about the fact that we transform the NHS in government. It's already gone backwards. And if you are proposing as a party to go back to the 1930s levels of public spending as a share of national income, as you was one of the first people to point out, then I think there is real fear about what that means for the vital public services.
Norman Smith, B.
Yeah, so that was his response to the BBC journalist, Norman Smith. And it's just toing and froing and nothing's getting done. There's far too much rhetoric going on and actual work doing. There seems to be no this day and age. It's all very short-termism, and that is the trouble with having a parliament in just for a certain amount of few years. That is they can't get nothing done because they haven't pre-planned, and all they come out is with rhetoric all the time. Anyway, we can move on to the next one, and this one is: can you trust David Cameron with the NHS?
You remember a few confidence speeches ago, I said if you could sum up the NHS, it is a living, breathing institution made up of people, doctors, nurses, patients. We say, let's stop the closure of these maternity units, accident and emergency units. There will be no more of those pointless reorganisations that aim for change but instead bring chaos. We can look the British people in the eye and say this party is the party of the NHS today, tomorrow, now, always.
The reason I played that clip here, he said the NHS is the people's now, today and always, except for when he sells it off to the corporates, his buddies, because that's what they've been doing for quite a while now. They've been cherry picking it, buying off the good bits that they can make profit out of, and that's all they're interested in.
And that were a video from Labour Party, so they spend all that time doing that video just to try and get one over David, where they should have put that time and effort into, you know, actually doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, planning and working out what's the best way of dealing with it. They're too busy throwing mud pies at each other, and they're wasting the time making the mud pies. Anyway, we'll go on to our last clip here, and this is basically telling you what it's coming to and how it's forcing people into decisions, drastic decisions at that.
I think I'm acutely aware of my own mortality at the moment, and most people in their 30s think that they've got decades, whereas I think I'm looking much more short term and kind of hoping for 35 and then 40. I will never forget that moment. In that moment, my entire life changed because I had cancer. I've been advised to have my ovaries removed. I can do that now, or I can wait for 5 years. If I wait 5 years, I don't know if the NHS will even still be there. And so that makes me inclined to have that surgery sooner rather than later, even though I'm not sure that's the best thing to do. I'm now in a position where I think I'm okay to move forward with my life, and I don't think I would be in this position without the team of staff that have been looking after me on the NHS and without my friends. I think it's terrifying that care for cancer patients and people at the end of life is being handed over to private companies. Right now, my care and those decisions are being supported by staff who are there in the business to look after me. My life is what they care about, keeping me alive, not about money or profit. People need to make their voices heard. They need to consider the NHS when they're voting in May and really appreciate what we currently have might be lost. I think
Now, the reason I showed that one is because it takes us full circle right back to the beginning of the setup of the NHS. It was set up so everybody got help and treatment when they needed it, not for profit making, not for the rich to get richer. It was for everybody to be able to use free at the point of use, at the point of delivery. So we've gone full circle on this, and that is my main point today. They are going full blunt force for privatisation, selling out, which David Cameron promised he would not do. Yet in the background, all the way through, they've been planning, scheming and plotting, putting in their people in different parts into the National Health Service so they could assess what's the best bits for them to cherry pick out of it. But as say, now they're going full blunt for the full takeover, and don't be bamboozled by these slick words they're coming out with, these slick policies that they're introducing, because at the end of the day, the way they introduce them, they have double meanings, and you've got to look in between of what they're saying, not what overall they're saying. Now, that's me done for my articles. Has anybody else got anything to say on that?
Well, I'll just go ahead and say that I think if you're going to be voting in May, just use these, you know, put them at your forefront of your mind and try and base it on these, such things like NHS.
Can I is that all right?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend by the name of Danny Bampin. I was on the phone to Danny earlier. Danny's just he'll be qualified with his law degree in May, but Danny has a thing going called the No Party. Michael Doherty also is now standing as an independent. Now, there are plenty of independents that do stand for Parliament. And the problem that we find ourselves in is because main parties have all huddled together. If we filled Parliament with independents from around the country, I'm pretty sure you would start getting some common sense approaches to what should be going on.
Yeah, you're dead right there, because independents, they won't come under any whip. All their politicians of the main parties are now being whipped into line. There isn't any freedom of the way they want to vote for their constituencies no more, because they're having to toe the party line or they're going to be whipped.
Exactly. Got rid of the whip and just independents. Fill Parliament with independents. If you're going to vote for your independents. If you feel obliged to vote, just look at what your independents can do up and down the country and think, you know what, if we fill Parliament with just independent MPs and politicians, things would change very, very quickly. Very quickly.
But how long would it be before these independents got hijacked?
Well, that's up to the people. That's the problem. I think politics has become stagnant. I think 60% of people don't vote. And that, for me, tells me that people just are not interested anymore. If it was to be a bit fresh and a bit current, and they was to start engaging and talking about doing good things, I think more people would turn out. So I just think that, I mean, you can always go and have a look at No Party. They've got their own website. I'm a great advocate for Danny Bampin. He's a good man, and Mike especially.
Sorry, my friends.
Pardon?
Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, and just before we go, I'd just like to say something on what you was talking about with the NHS. I had a nurse contact me a few months ago from Ashford who was in tears because she was being evicted from her nursing quarters, or the nursing home that she had. She had a young child. This woman was working more hours than God could send, helping people recover from all sorts of things and doing all the things that probably not many other people would do, because nurses are like that. And here she was asking me for advice because they were going to make her homeless. These people that work in the front line, firemen, nurses, doctors, the police, we need to pay them more. We need to give them the respect that's due and make them feel proud to be doing the jobs they're doing.
Yeah, they've been constantly attacked for decades now.
Well, this common purpose has took over though, Dave. How do we combat that?
I don't know. I mean, that common purpose for me, I think maybe it's all gone too far. Whether we can get back to something, I'm not sure. I hope we can. I really do. Common purpose it does run through everything. I know Brian Gerrish is very, very big on common purpose, but it's like I say, it's down for the people to see. I'm pretty clever with dealing with people from the system and just getting them to drop whatever it is they're bringing to me very quickly. Other people don't have that ability, but they do have the ability, but it's lack of knowledge. They don't have the knowledge and understanding of who they are, and if they grasp that and come together, they create a tsunami wave that will just be beautiful. It will be beautiful, and I can see it building in momentum. Over the last few years, I've been seeing more and more people engaging and wanting to see the change. The younger generations, the teenagers now, are starting to engage with it. This goes across so many different age levels. You know, it's not restricted to one sort of stereotype of people or an age group. Everyone is like a fever gripping the country. And like I said earlier, I don't think there's anything the system can do to stop what is coming. It's going to happen. Yeah. It's going to happen. Trust me.
It has to happen, definitely. And just on that, where you mentioned young people getting involved, even those that get follow Russell Brand, I mean, at least he's teaching them about politics, he's getting them involved. So they can't really think there's some sort of troublemaker like they're trying to do. In my opinion.
Russell Brand, Frankie Boyle. Frankie Boyle for me, he's very funny and he's very switched on. There are people that have a platform, and that's what Russell says. Russell says, I have an ability to amplify what the people are saying and feeling. Yeah. And when he was asked to get involved in politics, he said that would defeat what I have an ability to do. And I don't think Russell would do politics. I don't think he would become corruptible. Many people say bad things about Russell. I don't, because I've never met him. I've never shook his hand. So it would be rude of me to talk out of turn about the gentleman.
Well, I took offence with him for many years, and then recently he's actually grown on me to a point where I can accept him for him doing what he does, and credit to him. At least he's out there doing something.
Exactly.
And whatever he does say, and the amount of people he does get involved, at least he's getting people involved.
He's planting small seeds in people and should they choose and find it to their liking, they then can go out and research and find groups and talk to other people. This is communication. Social media gives us a platform to interact with one another, with our families, with people we don't really know, all around the country and all around the world. It's growing. I don't think the system sees the use of the internet and social media quite how they planned it to pan out. We can communicate with people all over the world on various different subjects, and it's growing and growing and growing. And by that token alone, things will change. And you don't need masses and masses of the population. If you just had up to 3% of the people of this country alone say, no, we want to change will happen.
That sounds like having 3% currency that we've got.
Currency, I mean, currency is a story for another day. I mean, I say, you know, Ellie and my family say, oh, David Cameron's cutting money here and he's saved money here and he's saved money there. And I say, look, David Cameron goes to the banks to borrow money at interest. So all the time that relationship exists, nothing can ever come out of debt. Yeah. All the time you're going to borrow £10 but having to pay 11 back, and that's the only relationship that a country has with a bank. Then and the bankers, for me, God bless them, they're the cause of all this problem, because it all filters down from them. They pay for the police, they pay for the courts, they pay for the judiciary. Everyone is owned by the bankers.
But I enter it though, Dave, like I'm sure you'd agree, it all goes back to each individual being responsible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter whether you're David Icke, who's really gone for it, or you're someone who's just saying no to TV licensing. Every small thing or big thing that you do which has a positive effect to you and your family and your life sends them a clear message, and that reverberates.
Yeah, definitely.
No more. I mean, TV licensing for me is the first thing that people ever really have a dabble with and say, no, I'm not paying this, I'm not a slave. You can't just walk into my house. Who are you people? And that's what most people challenge the TV licensing to start off with. And now you're seeing all this happen. People declassified it from criminal. I mean, it was never criminal in the first place. Their actions made it criminal, to be fair. So the more people just start politely saying and declining and saying, well, if you're saying that I have to do this, please show me how that is possible, because I don't agree. Show me where you've got any kind of power or jurisdiction over me, and what is it that you've got over me, and then you'll see them all start falling away at the wayside, because they have to, because once you expose the fraud to them, they have to back down.
For sure. They don't want to challenge something they've never really witnessed before.
A good mate of mine, I met him at Tom Crawford's eviction in Nottingham. I spoke to Tom Crawford earlier today as well, another blessed soul. My friend has released a song this week. It's on the iTunes downloads. It's called Sheeple.
Oh, yeah. Start about that, Dave. We've been up on that for
Right, okay. Well, my mate allegedly, Reese, bless young man, beautiful soul.
He's joining us tomorrow. He's on tomorrow night.
He's awesome, Reese. And this is, I always questioned what I was doing, and I always felt a bit isolated and a bit vulnerable, maybe in the early days. I missed the first eviction. I couldn't make it, and when I see the feedback a couple of days after, I'm like, oh man, I'm gutted. So January, I was going. I drove up the night before. I met Sue and Tom. We had a good chat in the pub. I met Mark Salon and Brian, Roger Hayes, Guy Taylor. and we all just sat there having a bit of a chit-chat. John Chat would turn. But the next day, when I woke up, got in my motor and drove round to the cul-de-sac, 8:30, 9 o'clock, I was overwhelmed by the amount of people that turned out, and I'm like, wow. Now, I can tell you that on that day, there was 700 to 800 people there, easy.
Yeah. Oh,
it
yeah,
was amazing.
It were a good turnout. He's had many turnouts. There's been a lot of good turnouts. I mean, like you said, we said earlier at the start of this Flux News, we were talking about the, is it the call to arms marches in London and Glasgow?
Yeah.
Well, we're covering that tomorrow. That's going to be tomorrow's Flux News.
Right, okay. I mean, Ireland, if anyone sort of is watching anything that's going on in Ireland at the moment, I mean, the Irish are absolutely turning out in mass on various different issues, because the Irish joined the Euro quite some time ago. And I've been to Ireland, and the houses that are boarded up out there and the families that have been displaced is staggering.
Yeah.
But there's a woman, I'm not too sure of her name, who's been really taking this to the High Courts. They've also been turning out to auction houses where the properties are being sold, and they've shut the auctions down. The Irish are really, really, really smacking this. And I think in the next few months, Ireland, the people are just demanding. They are absolutely demanding that justice be done, justice be served. And all credit to anyone that does what they do and puts their head above the parapet and says, I'm not prepared to put up with this no more. I take my hat off to each and every one of them, because when we have tyranny put in our face, it's always people come from far and wide. It's always the people, they see it, they feel it, they feel that bad things are happening, and their moral compass won't let it happen. And it's people that just, no, that's not right. I'm not going to tolerate that, because when we've done a wrong and it feels wrong within us, that's what sparks us. And it's people come from far. I mean, when I was at Tom, there was people from Wales that come over from Ireland. There was someone there from America. I'm like, OMG. And it's overwhelmed Tom for sure. I mean, every time I talk to Tom, he's like, I can't believe the people have turned out and they're doing what they're doing for us. It's just where there isn't an army or a police force in this country that can challenge 700 to 800 people protecting that man's home, because that is the law right there. That's the living, breathing law saying, no, enough is enough. You're not doing this. And when the police actually, they put up an helicopter about 2:30 in the afternoon, for me, I thought to myself, what a waste of taxpayers' money. First of all, the bailiffs arrived. I managed to get them, and I said, and even Roger Hayes come flying down here, because I could see it going to go turning, because I thought there's 400 people descended on these bailiffs' vehicles. I'm thinking they're going to turn us over. I'm shouting at people, let them go, let them go, let them go. The bailiffs went, the police sent an helicopter up, and I thought to myself, that is such a waste of money, because all the police had to do was engage with the people, send a couple of their officers, high ranking, whatever, down. What's going on here? Why are you all turning out? We're in a situation where it's them and us. They look at us as cannon fodder, surf pond life, really, because they think they've got a divine right to rule over us. And that was very poignant for me. When I see that helicopter in the sky, I'm thinking, why? There isn't anyone here that's showing any violence, any detriment to anyone from the system, and yet you're observing us from a distance. It was a surreal situation, in fairness. I hope it all pans out well for Tom, but when the people come together, and it's what I've said earlier, this will only ever happen if the people will it so. If enough people not doing that, they then use their brains, they come together as a collective, they start amplifying and making their feelings known. The system has no choice but to change, really, does it?
That's exactly right. We're up to see that, Dave. It's really great to have your thoughts and your comments with us.
Thank you.
Just give the audience a little reminder of what we're going to be covering tomorrow, which is the call to arms marches up and down UK. And we're also going to have two guests, one Nigel Amara from White Flowers, and hopefully Ruby Atkar with us. So do join us tomorrow, and hopefully Reese as well. So we might ask him to do his little version of Sheeple as well.
It do Sheeple, and if you really want to relax in time, ask him to play you some flamenco on his guitar. He's most excellent.
Yeah, I will do. Nice one for a reminder. Have you seen that Marston's one?
Yeah, I know Reese well. We talk a lot. All the boys from Beat the Banks, Beat the Bailiffs. I know in the groups there's a bit of infraction and a little bit of disagreement. I won't never get involved in that because I just want positive things to come. I won't get involved in any negativity and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that bad things don't happen, they do, but it's just not for me. And mate, you look at Beat the Bailiff, they're 26,000 members.
Yeah.
26,000 plus members. I mean, I'm head of, with others, of Response South East, and we've been out to evictions, bailiff attempts. It doesn't really go off down this part of the country, because if I get wind of an eviction locally, I'll try my hardest to rally some people together and go down there. But up north, Wesley Ahmed's country and stuff like that, it really tends to be more prolific there. And when I look at what Wes does and the likes of him in response for that area, Amy Sutcliffe, Matthew Sanders, Carl Hessian, I'm fortunate enough to be connected with so many people around the country and around the world. It's hard sometimes to keep my mind on who I'm talking to and where it's all going. But I'll take me out after them people, because they're shepherding the weak. Blessed are those that shepherd the weak, and they see the problems. I mean, they had one the other day with GMP turned up with armed police.
Well, we're going to be covering that Monday on police episode, second part to this, which is NHS. This one on Monday, mate, we'll be doing police. If you want to join us Monday, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool.
We'll cover all that. Got videos and.
Why do they send armed police? I grew up watching war films, you know, the Nazis and the Germans, the baddies and stuff. And when I used to watch how the Gestapo used to go and single out families and whip them out, and they'd take them off to and never be seen again, and they'd turn up in force with guns, and I just think to myself, I'm living in that now. I'm living in a country where that is happening, where neighbours hide behind curtains because they're too scared to come out. And we've got police. Now, let's say what would have happened briefly had people said, no, challenge the police. Would one of them officers have drawn a sidearm? Would they have drawn a sidearm? Well, how far would they have gone? In what do you believe? How far they would have gone?
Leave that as a cliffhanger, Dave, and we'll cover that on Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man.
If you're able to join us, that is.
Yeah, appreciate your time, guys, and keep up doing the good work. And Bridger, you've documented the NHS sublimely tonight. Fair play to you.
All right, guys, that's all we've got time for. Thanks for tuning in. Do join us tomorrow for the call to arms review and reports on that, and also Monday for the coverage of the police. But until then,
bless you.
Yeah, take care. Look after yourselves.
Thank you. Good night.